Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. You guys were early investors in China, one of the earliest investors in Alibaba, for example. You also have backed Slack, Airbnb, companies that, are really interesting storylines as this outbreak continues to spread. What did you learn from the coronavirus outbreak in China, and how did it impact your companies there? And what kind of lessons can you bring from that to some of the companies you have here in the United States?
Yeah, it's a great question, Emily, and there is a lot to learn. As I'm sure you guys have reported, China has dealt with this in a pretty effective manner, and for the most part, it looks like their economy will start to rebound in Q2. A couple things that we saw in China and Japan and Singapore and Korea, some of the other Asian countries that were hit hard by this before we were. Number one, the impact is pretty severe, and so we had been coaching our portfolio companies in the U.S. now for several weeks to take this seriously, to expect a pretty significant economic impact. For example, on the enterprise side, we've coached our companies to expect up to an 80% drop in bookings in Q2, which sounds significant, but when you factor in the idea that everybody's going to be working from home for several weeks or months now, it's just hard to get business done. And so that was one of the early things. Two was prepare to work from home. We knew this would be a big impact on U.S. workforces, and that tech companies in particular are well equipped to work from home. But we got to make that transition. And the good news is folks have been using Slack, they've been using Zoom, they've been on the various work from home technologies now for 5+ years with teams around the world. And so for a lot of our companies, this was a slight shift, not a huge shift to going to work from home. The third one is preserve cash. When the market tightens up and we see a crisis in America, cash becomes really important. And so a lot of our companies are very well capitalized. Many of them have 12, 18, 24 months of runway, which we're thrilled with because things get tough. When the public market comes back and pulls down, you have an immediate impact on the private market, and we're certainly seeing that.
So not only are folks working from home, they're having to work through this very critical time, trying to decide, can they keep hiring? Should they have layoffs? Will they survive? I mean, how do you even begin to coach some of your CEOs and founders on how to deal with this? This is not just a public health crisis, but also potentially the life or death of their company.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard, and it's very personal. I've done probably 30 calls with CEOs and founders over the last 10 days. And, the one thing that really hits home for all of us, I think, is it's very personal. We all have families, we have kids, we have extended families that we're concerned about. And there's a certain amount of fear and doubt that creeps into your mind as a consumer and as a resident in the United States. But as a CEO, there's an especially challenging situation because you've got to sort of compartmentalize that and turn around and leave. You've got to put action plans in place, put leadership plans in place, reconstruct your financial models for the year, focus on survival, focus on getting through this really difficult period, and then also coming into work every day, which oftentimes means going from your kitchen to your living room and saying hello to your children, and then starting the day full of confidence. You've got to be confident. You've got to be in charge. You've got to have your teams responding to you. And so one of the things that we're seeing is people really up the level of communication. A lot of, we're seeing people do virtual happy hours where they're getting people around the world to get together, virtual lunches, they're doing costume contests. But the number one rule of thumb is, as a CEO, be a leader, be confident, and increase the amount of communication because it's hard.
And I understand, Jeff, just quickly, that you've got some fun backdrops that you can toggle between to add some humor into your meetings. What do you got there?
Well, I'll show you a couple. I've got, here's me at In-N-Out. So when I'm feeling hungry, I cruise down to the In-N-Out. I've got, this is on the gondola at Squaw Valley when I want to feel like I'm in a happy place. And then one of my favorite things is Stagecoach and Coachella down in Palm Desert. And it's unfortunately canceled this year. So I've got the background to remind me.